Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are heading to a place that I think a lot of us have, a very specific mental image of. We're talking about Dubai.
Hmm.
And usually, when we talk about Dubai, it's the skylines, the tourism, luxury living. But today, we are going completely behind the scenes.
Into the engine room.
Exactly. The engine room of the economy,
Yeah.
the commercial real estate market. And I have to be honest, digging into these sources, I realized my entire intuition about how business works was, well, completely backwards for this region.
It happens to the best of us. You go in with a certain set of assumptions based on London or New York or, Singapore.
Right.
And Dubai just has a way of flipping those on their head.
It really does. Because in most of the world, if you're a serious business owner, let's say you're a CEO setting up a regional HQ, what's the first thing you want?
Stability.
Stability, you want a 10-year lease, maybe 20. You want to plant your flag, build out your dream office, and know that your rent is locked in. That's the gold standard.
Right. You want to hedge against inflation. You
Yeah.
want certainty. It's the traditional mindset.
But in Dubai, the sources suggest that this very instinct, that desire to lock things down for decades, might actually be a massive trap.
It's not just a financial trap. It can be a legal labyrinth. And this is the central tension we found. You have international businesses coming in with a Western mindset thinking, I need a 20-year lease to be safe.
Yeah.
But the Dubai market, it operates on a totally different frequency. And if you try to force that long-term model onto this market without understanding the local laws, specifically the difference between Dubai and the DIA,
Yeah.
you're just going to run into a wall.
So that is our mission today. We are going to decode this high-stakes world. We'll look at why the 25-year lease is basically a unicorn.
No, it really is.
We're going to untangle this bizarre legal split between the jurisdictions, and we're going to talk about why agility is, counterintuitively, eating stability for lunch.
It's a total clash of philosophies. And if you don't know the rules, like why leaving your office empty for a month could get you evicted, you're playing a very dangerous game.
Let's start with the basics then. The time frame. In my head, a commercial lease is a long-term marriage. But the sources say that in Dubai, the standard isn't 10 years. It's 1 year.
It is surprisingly short. The standard commercial lease you'll find for most office or retail spots is just 1 year.
1 year. That sounds chaotic. I mean, if I'm spending money on fit-outs and branding, I don't want to worry about my lease expiring every 12 months. It feels like you're constantly living out of boxes.
It feels precarious if you're used to the Western model, absolutely. But here's the nuance. It's a 1-year lease, but it is renewable.
Ah, okay.
The system is designed for a different kind of rhythm. It allows for adjustments. Where people get into trouble, though, is when they try to bypass this and demand that 25-year lease.
Because they want that security.
Exactly. But if you go into the market looking for that long-term lock-in, you'll find the inventory just isn't there. And there's a cultural and economic reason for that. The sources highlight a really strong preference among local landlords for absolute ownership.
Meaning they don't want to be tied down either.
Well, it means local companies with deep roots prefer to build equity. They would rather own the building outright than get into these very long-term leaseholds that kind of act like ownership.
Right, they want the asset.
They want the asset. So the market just isn't structured to offer you a 30-year lease because the landlords aren't looking to sell off their rights for that long.
So the product barely even exists.
Barely. But there's also a massive legal restriction we have to flag immediately. This is the foreigner rule.
This jumped out at me. It seemed like a pretty hard line in the sand.
It's a crucial regulatory nugget. If you're a non-UAE national or a company that isn't fully owned by one,
Okay.
generally speaking, you cannot get a lease longer than 25 years.
Wait, so even if I find a landlord willing to sign a 30-year deal, the law might step in and say, nope, can't do that.
Precisely. If you're not in one of those designated zones, you are capped.
Mm-hmm.
The law is protecting the ultimate ownership of the land. Now, there are exceptions.
Of course.
If you go to the Abu Dhabi global market, the ADGM or other specific investment zones, you can find leases that go up to 99 years.
99 years is, that's effectively ownership.
It is. Legally, it's a whole different ballgame. But the sources are clear. Those 99-year zones are the exception, not the rule, for the average business looking for a standard office.
Right, in downtown Dubai or Business Bay.
That 25-year cap is a real constraint. You have to play by the local rules.
And speaking of rules, this brings us to what I found to be the most confusing, but also the most critical part of this deep dive, the jurisdictions. I knew Dubai had free zones, but I didn't realize it was literally a tale of two cities when it comes to the legal system itself.
It is fascinating, isn't it? You could literally cross the street and be under a completely different legal framework, not just different rules, but a different underlying legal philosophy.
So let's unpack this for everyone, because this
Mhm.
seems critical if you ever end up in a dispute. We have Dubai tenancy law and we have DIFC law. What is the actual difference?
Okay, so let's start with the broader one, Dubai tenancy law, specifically law number 26 of 2007. This applies to most of the emirate.
So Sheikh Zayed Road, a mall, that kind of thing?
Exactly. Your typical business tower. This is all managed by RRA, the Real Estate Regulatory Agency.
And this is where that term ijari comes in, right? I see that word everywhere. Is that just a receipt?
It is so much more than a receipt. Ijari actually means my rent in Arabic. And under this system, you have to register your lease with the government. And the sources emphasize this isn't just paperwork.
It's not optional.
Not at all. You need an Ijari certificate to get visas for your staff, to get your trade licenses, even to get your electricity and water connected.
So if you don't have the ijari, you effectively don't exist as a business.
Yeah, it makes the lease official. Without it, you have no recognized tenancy. You can't go to the rental dispute center. It is your shield.
Okay, so that's standard Dubai, civil law, RERA, and JARI. But then you have the DIFC, the Dubai International Financial Center. How is that different?
The DIFC operates under its own framework, its own law.
Yep.
Real Property Law number 4 of 2007. And here's the kicker. It's based on English common law principles.
Common law. Okay, for those of us who aren't lawyers, why does that matter? Civil versus common.
It matters for predictability.
Mm.
Simply put, civil law, which is what standard Dubai law is based on, is very codified. The judge looks at the written code and applies it.
Right.
Common law, which is used in the UK, the US, and the DISC, relies heavily on case law and precedent.
So if I'm a big international bank from New York or London, the DIFC feels like home.
That's the design intent, exactly. It gives Western institutions a legal environment that feels familiar. They have their own courts, their own registrar. If your lease is longer than a year in the DIFC, you register it there, not with a JARI.
So why should someone listening care about this? Is it just academic?
It matters immensely because of how disputes are handled. The rules of the game change completely. If you get into a fight with your landlord, the court you go to, the precedents they use, it all depends on exactly where your building sits physically. You cannot assume anything.
That is a huge aha moment. You really have to check the map. But let's move from the law to the market itself, because regardless of jurisdiction, the market drives behavior. And right now, the sources describe a bit of a squeeze.
Squeeze is the polite way to put it. We're seeing significant inflation in the commercial sector. Rents are climbing. And this creates a very specific psychological panic for tenants.
I can imagine. You see the rent going up 15, 20% year on year, and your instinct is, I need to lock this in now. You want that long lease to freeze your rent.
Precisely. You want cost certainty. You're trying to hedge. But here's the problem. The landlords are not blind. They know rents are rising too. And because demand for grade A office space is so high, the sources say we are firmly in a landlord's market.
The landlords are in the driver's seat.
They are holding all the cards. I mean, think about it from their perspective. Why would I lock you in for 10 years at today's price?
When the market value might double in 5 years.
Exactly. It doesn't make financial sense. So landlords are becoming very hesitant to sign long-term deals unless the terms are heavily in their favor, maybe with built-in escalations that erase your savings anyway.
The sources even mention some landlords are taking properties off the market temporarily. That seems extreme.
It's strategic.
Yeah.
They're waiting. They're weighing their options. They're being selective. They might prefer a tenant who pays a year up front in one check over one who wants a 10-year term.
Wow.
So the tenant comes in thinking, I have the power, I'm the customer. But the reality is the landlord is sitting back saying, make me an offer, because there are 3 other companies waiting.
That shifts the power dynamic completely.
Hmm.
And it leads to this trap of being locked in. I want to ask about the myth of walking away, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs have this idea, well, if the business goes bust, I'll just leave.
And that is a dangerous, expensive assumption. The expert advice here is a hard no. You can't just walk away.
But surely if I'm losing money, if the business is insolvent.
Doesn't matter to the landlord. These leases are binding contracts. Unilateral termination, meaning one side just deciding to end it, is generally not supported by the law,
Right, exactly. Yeah.
unless you have a specific break clause written into the contract.
A break clause, that's something you have to negotiate before you sign.
Absolutely. If there's one piece of tactical advice here, it is this. Do not sign a multi-year lease without a break clause. Without it, if you leave early, the law is not on your side.
So what happens if I just stop paying and leave? I ghost the landlord.
You'd face significant penalties. You could be liable for the rent for the rest of the term, for the landlord's costs in finding a new tenant. And remember, in the UAE, financial defaults can have very serious legal consequences. It is not a clean break.
An eviction isn't instant either, right? If I'm the landlord, I can't just change the locks.
No, it's a process. Landlords have to give formal notarized notices. But there is a list in the sources, I call it the scary list, of specific grounds for termination where things get serious fast.
I saw this list. Abandonment was the one that shocked me. That feels very specific to this region.
Yes, this is very specific to commercial space. If you leave a commercial property empty for 30 consecutive days,
30 days.
or 90 non-consecutive days in a year, that can be grounds for eviction.
Wait, really? If I just don't show up to the office for a month, say my team is working remotely for August.
Correct. If the lights are off and the doors locked for 30 consecutive days, the landlord can petition to evict you.
What is the logic behind that? Why does the landlord care if I'm there as long as I'm paying rent?
The logic is that commercial space is meant to be used for commerce. It's about the vitality of the city, of the building. If a building is half empty, it affects property values, it affects the retail downstairs.
Oh,
So you can't just rent an office and use it as storage. You have a duty to occupy.
that is wild. 30 days. That's a massive pitfall for a remote-first company. What else is on the list?
Oh, the usual suspects. Subletting without permission, that's a big one. Illegal use of the property. And of course, non-payment of rent.
Now, what about the flip side? What if the landlord wants to kick me out?
This is where the law tries to balance things. If a landlord wants to terminate early because they want to use the property themselves or demolish it, they often have to give significant notice, usually 12 months.
And they actually have to use it, right? They can't just say, I need it, and then rent it to someone else for more money.
Exactly. That is the compensation detail. If they evict you, claiming they need it for personal use, and then they don't move in or they rent it out again, the tenant can claim compensation. And that's usually capped at 1 year's rent. So there is protection against landlords just trying to cycle tenants to jack up the price.
So we've painted a picture here that's a bit intense. Rents are rising, landlords are tough, the law is complex, you can't easily break a lease. It feels like a minefield. If I'm a business owner listening, I'm thinking, maybe I just shouldn't get an office.
And you wouldn't be alone in that thought. And that is why we're seeing this major pivot in the market. The solution that's emerging isn't legal, it's structural. We're talking about the flexible revolution.
Right. If you can't get a long lease and a short lease exposes you to rent hikes, what do? You stop playing the traditional game.
You change the asset class. The sources highlight the massive rise of co-working spaces, serviced offices, and flexible workspaces. This is the new survival strategy.
And this isn't just about freelancers anymore, is it?
No, not at all. We are seeing established companies, even multinationals, moving into these spaces. The sources mention areas like Al Barsha are booming with these options.
It makes sense. It's space as a service.
It is all about agility. In a traditional lease, you're renting, say, 5,000 square feet. Whether you have 50 employees or 5, you pay for 5,000 square feet.
Right.
You also pay for the fit-out, the furniture, the utilities, the internet, the cleaning. That's a massive capital expenditure, a huge CapEx.
You're sinking cash into carpets before you've sold a single product.
Exactly. In a flexible setup, you shift all of that to OpEx operating expenditure. You pay a monthly fee per desk. If you win a big contract, you add 10 desks. If you lose a client, you drop 5. You scale up and down without penalties.
It is pure risk management.
That's the bottom line. It's avoiding the burden of a rigid contract in a volatile market. If you sign a 5-year lease, you are betting your business will look exactly the same in 5 years in Dubai. That is a very risky bet.
I love that. It turns the whole premise of this deep dive on its head. We started by asking, why can't I get a 25-year lease? And the answer turns out to be, why would you even want one?
Precisely. The market is telling us something. The old headquarters model is fading. Distributed workforces don't need 10,000 square feet of empty desks.
Yeah.
They need on-demand meeting rooms, a virtual office address for the trade license, and maybe a few private offices.
So let's bring this all home. We went from the myth of the long lease to the reality of the one-year renewable standard.
We looked at the critical difference between Dubai law and DIFC law, and the key takeaway there is check your jurisdiction.
Check the map. And we saw how the landlord's market is forcing tenants to rethink their whole strategy.
And finally, the rise of the flexible office as the ultimate hedge against uncertainty.
Agility is the new stability. I think that is going to stick with me.
It should. And if I can leave you with one final thought. We tend to treat real estate as a fixed asset. The name itself implies it. Real estate just sits there. But in a market as dynamic and fast-moving as Dubai, perhaps the only asset that truly matters is your ability to move. If the law and the market both favor the flexible, why are we still chasing the 10-year lease? Maybe the smartest building you can be in is the one you can leave next month.
That is a provocative thought to end on. If you're listening to this and looking at office space in Dubai, maybe put down the pen on that long-term contract. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
A pleasure, as always.